The world as we knew it ended with a mass teleportation that dragged thousands of souls into a ruthless game of life and death. A magical rabbit appeared before the survivors, announcing that they were participants in a survival trial where the weak would quickly perish. Dune was assigned the Purification skill, an ability deemed absolutely useless for combat by his fellow survivors. During a frantic escape from a giant rolling boulder trap, Dune stepped on a hidden pressure plate and plummeted into a deep, dark hole. The Administrator Rabbit looked down into the pit and laughed, declaring that Dune's chance of survival was 0%. Trapped at the bottom and bleeding heavily, Dune watched as his comrades abandoned him to complete the first phase of the game. When the first phase ended, a miracle occurred as the system granted full recovery to all survivors, including the forgotten boy in the pit. The dungeon reset and the hole closed above him, yet Dune remained alive and sealed within the earth. The rabbit reappeared to check for a corpse, only to find Dune throwing a stone to pass the time. Upon checking the system, the rabbit realized that Dune's name had disappeared from the participant list, marking him as a dead entity. Realizing he was now a bug in the dungeon's code, Dune decided he wouldn't simply wait to die slowly in the dark. He tried to dig his way out with his bare hands, but the work was grueling and left his palms covered in painful calluses. In a moment of idle curiosity, he wondered if his inventory system could store the dirt he was excavating. To his absolute shock, the dirt vanished into his inventory, allowing him to dig simply by touching the walls. With a new sense of purpose, Dune began digging through the earth like a human excavator, clearing paths at lightning speed. A system message appeared, announcing that he had unlocked a new skill, digging. He wasn't satisfied with just a hole. He wanted a base where he could live in comfort despite the rabbit's curses. By mixing the stored dirt with a bit of water he found, Dune realized he could mold the resulting clay into solid objects. He began crafting furniture, starting with a simple but sturdy bed made entirely of purified clay. Days passed as the dead boy transformed the lethal pit into a cozy, multi-room underground house. The rabbit eventually returned to see if the worm food had rotted, only to find the pit had become a tunnel. As the rabbit moved deeper, he saw torches lining the walls and heard the sound of whistling from within. Dune greeted the shocked administrator while calmly roasting a piece of meat he had stored earlier. Furious at this violation of the dungeon's order, the rabbit screamed that the next reset would bury Dune alive. Suddenly, the entire base began to shake violently as the system initiated a total dungeon reset. Dune ran as fast as his legs could carry him, trying to reach a safe corner before the rooms collapsed. To the rabbit's utter disbelief, the tremors stopped, and the base remained perfectly intact. It appeared that the rules of the dungeon reset no longer applied to Dune's bugged creations. The rabbit cursed him, warning that while the base was safe, the monsters below the earth would eventually find him. No sooner had the rabbit left than a loud crack echoed from the back wall, and water began to flood the tunnels. Dune realized he would drown if he didn't plug the leak immediately, so he began pulling mounds of dirt from his inventory. The loose dirt was washed away by the pressure, forcing him to find a more permanent solution. Pushing his skills to the limit, Dune focused all his energy on shaping the wet clay into solid, fired bricks. He quickly built a brick dam across the breach, sealing the water away and creating a functional well. Dune mocked the returning rabbit, pointing out that he had solved his water shortage and decorated his home at the same time. A system chime rang out as the dungeon rewarded his ingenuity with an achievement, Water Source Master. With infinite water and fresh fish, Dune felt like the king of his own secret world, far from the dangers above. That peace was shattered when the smell of his cooking barbecue rose to the surface, attracting the attention of a massive predator. A giant horned boar smashed through the ceiling of his base, landing right in the middle of his living room. Dune stared at the furious beast, realizing his safe base had just become a death trap with nowhere to run. The monstrous beast lunged forward with a roar that shook the very foundations of the cavern. Dune didn't flinch, but instead reached into his digital inventory with a swift motion. He pulled out a stack of purified stone blocks that shimmered with a faint white light. With a flick of his wrist, he slammed the first block into the ground right before the beast's claws hit. The monster's heavy claws sparked against the indestructible material of the purified block. Dune smirked as he realized the system's physics couldn't break what he had technically purified out of existence. He began moving his hands like a master pianist, manifesting hundreds of bricks in a single second. A solid wall of stone erupted from the dirt, trapping the beast's head within the masonry. High above on a floating platform, the administrator rabbit pulled at its long ears in sheer disbelief. The rabbit screamed that such a building speed was a violation of the dungeon's fundamental coding. Dune ignored the tiny tyrant and focused on the massive underground lake situated at the edge of the chamber. He calculated the volume of the water and the structural integrity required to build a massive dam. Using his digging skill, he carved deep trenches into the cavern floor to serve as foundations. He poured thousands of inventory stones into the gap, creating a base that no flood could ever hope to move. A massive stone dam began to rise, cutting the underground lake in half with surgical precision. The water level on one side began to rise rapidly, putting immense pressure on his new construction. Dune reinforced the structure with purified iron rods he had scavenged from the betrayal site. He waved at the administrator's invisible cameras, knowing the rabbit was watching his every move. The rabbit pounded its desk, screaming that the water was supposed to be an impassable environmental hazard. In a desperate attempt to stop him, the rabbit triggered the dungeon reset protocol early. The walls of the cavern began to shake and dissolve into white pixels as the world started to reload. Dune sat down on his dam and opened his inventory, unaffected by the deletion process. Because the system recognized him as dead, he was excluded from the reset logic. As the new floor materialized beneath him, it merged with the bottom of his dam. The dam was now a permanent fixture of the new floor's geography. Dune began to build a central tower that would serve as his lookout and home. The tower rose higher than the tallest trees, topped with a balcony made of purified glass. He then crafted a series of automated traps using the Purification stone's unique properties. He watched as a group of low-level skeleton mobs tried to approach and were instantly launched into the sky. "This isn't a dungeon anymore," he whispered to himself. "It's my sandbox." He spent the next few hours organizing his massive inventory of purified materials. Among his items, he found a strange, pulsing black orb he hadn't noticed before. As he touched the orb, a cold chill ran down his spine, and the room began to darken. The shadows on the wall detached themselves and began to crawl toward him like liquid. Dune tried to put the orb back in his inventory, but the system displayed an error message. The orb spoke in a raspy, ancient voice that sounded like grinding stones. It claimed to be a fragment of the witch who created this entire lethal game. She offered him a deal, true freedom in exchange for destroying the administrator rabbit. Dune looked out at his fortress and then back at the shadowy orb. Before he could answer, the tower door was blown inward by a massive blast of golden energy. The administrator rabbit stood at the threshold, holding a glowing staff that pulsed with the power of the sun. "You've played enough, little bug," the rabbit hissed, raising its staff to delete Dune forever. Dune gripped the black orb tightly, realizing he had to make a choice between the system and the shadows. The orb began to merge with his skin, its dark energy clashing violently with the administrator's light. As the two powers collided, the entire tower began to crumble into the void once again. Dune saw a familiar face in the distance, one of his lost comrades being dragged away by shadow magic. He lunged toward her, but the administrator's golden chains wrapped around his throat. The rabbit laughed, declaring that no bug could ever save a soul intended for deletion. Dune felt the witch's power surge through him, giving him a strength that defied the game's rules. He glared at the rabbit, ready to tear the system apart to reach his friend. Dune stood before the mysterious magic circle as it hummed with an eerie, dark energy. The rabbit recognized the ancient script as shadow magic belonging to the legendary Sherpa. Rugal explained that this circle was a remnant of the witch's influence over the forest. Dune noticed a hidden sequence within the circle that mirrored his own inventory system. The rabbit realized they had stumbled upon a secret storage dimension used by the witch's cat. Dune remembered the ancient bracelet he had been carrying since his first victory. He pressed the bracelet against the center of the circle to unlock the gateway. A massive pillar of light erupted, momentarily blinding everyone in the forest. When Dune opened his eyes, he was standing in a world filled with floating ruins. Broken sculptures of a beautiful woman in a crown lay scattered across the ground. Rugal noted that Sherpa had spent centuries trying to recreate his lost master's image. The rabbit felt a rare moment of sympathy for the cat who mourned for so long. Dune realized the entire dungeon was actually a giant machine designed to collect mana. Sherpa had automated the systems in a desperate attempt to resurrect the dead. Dune understood that shadow magic could only hold memories, not life itself. He vowed to use this knowledge to find his real friends who were still trapped. The rabbit demanded to know how Dune planned to escape such a complex system. Dune smiled and explained that every system has a back door for its creator. He began to dig directly into the air, using his skill to tear the dimension open. The rabbit watched as the very fabric of the game world started to unravel. Through the rift, Dune could see the silhouettes of other survivors fighting for their lives. He stepped through the portal, ready to bring his building skills to the final battle. With a wave of his hand, he summoned thousands of bricks to form a protective wall. The monsters were crushed beneath the weight of his rapid-fire constructions. His comrades looked up in awe at the man who had supposedly died in the pit. Dune declared that the game was over and he was the new master of the world. The Administrator Rabbit sighed, realizing he could never control a bug this powerful. Dune used his Purification skill one last time to cleanse the entire dungeon of its malice. The dark trees turned into lush forests, and the toxic water became crystal clear. Rugal looked at the transformed world and felt the witch's spirit finally at rest. Dune built a massive city for the survivors, far better than the world they left behind. He sat on a simple stone bench, watching the sunset with a sense of completion. The rabbit appeared one last time, offering Dune a permanent position as the system head. Dune politely declined, stating he preferred to be a simple builder of his own life. The rabbit vanished, leaving Dune in a world that was no longer a game, but a home. He was greeted by the comrades he had fought so hard to save. The screen of the system flickered one last time before dissolving into stardust. Dune looked at his hands, knowing he would never need to dig for survival again. Tomorrow would bring a new era where they were the masters of their own destiny. The bug player had finally built a world where everyone could live without fear.